Hello, everyone. Lucy Heavens here with another episode of CMO Therapy, a podcast that's hopefully going to help you navigate your way through your marketing journey. Because let me tell you, I get it. Being a marketing leader is no walk in the park. In each episode, we dive headfirst into the world of marketing, where uncertainty, tight budgets, and fierce competition are just the beginning of the roller coaster ride. But guess what? You are not alone in this journey. Why go solo when you can tap into the powerhouse of insights from some of the most awesome marketing leaders in the game? And look, the title might include the word therapy, but we are not just talking about challenges here. We are tackling them head on. So join us as we deep dive into the nitty gritty, share war stories, and unlock secret strategies. And get ready for no holds barred conversations because sometimes I have no filter. So if you are a chief marketing officer, a marketing lead, or someone just looking to up their marketing game, then I am so glad that you are here with us today. And today I am especially excited to have the very awesome Sinead Willis here with me. Sinead, can you give a little bit of an introduction to the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hello, everybody that's listening. My name's Sinead. I essentially work in marketing recruitment, and I've spent the last 12 to 14 years basically working with senior marketing leaders across businesses of all different shapes and sizes and helping them secure new opportunities, helping them enter businesses of different stages of growth, from startups to scale-ups. And I meet probably around 40 different marketers on a weekly basis, in person or on video. And so this is a space that I literally live and breathe, essentially. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Thank you very much. So the title of the podcast that we chose today when we had a little bit of a chat was The Messy Reality of the Modern CMO. And
Yeah.
like I said in my intro, I am so excited to have you here, Sinead. So if anybody isn't following or connected to Sinead on LinkedIn, please go and follow in LinkedIn, because if you use the CMO Therapy podcast for therapy, Sinead's LinkedIn channel or LinkedIn posts are even better therapy for you. I actually live and die by them each week. Sinead caught my eye because honestly, your posts on LinkedIn are just absolutely amazing. You say, I
Thank
think,
you.
what every CMO and marketing leader is thinking and feeling on a daily basis, and I really,
Yeah.
really applaud and appreciate you for putting all of that out there, and not keeping it kind of hidden behind closed doors. Because obviously, us in our full-time roles or in our permanent jobs, we can't say all those things on LinkedIn that
Yeah.
we would like to sometimes say. Yeah, so thank you. So yeah, that's the reason. I know it's a bit strange. Normally the guests on this podcast are CMOs, but when I read your posts and I had to have you on as a guest
Thank you.
to chat through this. So thank you. So yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about is, like I said, the messy reality of the modern CMO, just really how hard it is at the moment.
Mm.
Some of the challenges that you hear, and how you are, helping
Hmm.
CMOs to secure new roles and to get over those challenges as well, or at least have those,
Yeah.
upfront discussions
Yeah.
about them. So yes, so like I said, your post for me definitely another element of therapy that I need and I don't have to pay for. So thank you very much. Why do you think that the that reality of the senior marketing roles is so misunderstood? Most of your posts are around kind of the misunderstanding from an
Yeah.
external point of view of what the CMO's role is and what we're actually doing. Why is that?
Yeah. Honestly, I think it's because marketers, or CMOs, should I say, are a little bit polite to say some of the things out loud. Basically, you'll see from the content that I put out there, like you said, a lot of it is stuff that people they talk about in their like WhatsApp groups, for instance, or they talk about it with their peers, but it doesn't often extend beyond that. There's kind of like an unwritten rule within marketing, for instance, it's like you don't bite the hand that feeds you, or you don't call out the broken brief, or you don't necessarily name the dynamics that's making the role really hard. And so a lot of people that I speak to, they just grin and bear it often, and they show up, they adapt, they smile, and they make it work. And so the reality of like what it's actually like to be a senior marketer isn't as widely spoken about. And so the things that people experience all of the time, like the consistent justification loops, or the moving of the goalposts, and coming in and the founder's rewritten your whole strategy, or fighting for the seat at the table consistently, all of that, it stays often offline, and it doesn't necessarily go onto the record. And so because people are not always talking about this stuff publicly, a lot of companies, they kind of get away with like not necessarily looking at themselves. And so a lot of the time, the assumption is that if, say, for instance, a CMO goes into a business and it doesn't necessarily work out, the assumption from a lot of people has been that, it was the marketeer, like, let's just get a new marketeer. And it was never to like look at the environment, because people didn't understand what was actually happening. And so like the reason that I started to post quite frequently about all the stuff that I post about on my LinkedIn is because I was having these conversations, and like on a daily basis, I have probably about 8. Sometimes it can be 10 conversations with marketers, basically. So a lot of conversations. And in these conversations, people are telling me the same thing like on repeat. And I'll be speaking to like really brilliant people, and they're telling me about these things that they're experiencing. And I started to realize that a lot of them were in the situations where it wasn't necessarily them. It was seemed more like the system was not like set up to succeed, in a lot of businesses. And so I thought someone needs to start posting about this stuff, or someone needs to start saying this stuff out loud. And that's basically what I did. I started posting about it and saying it out loud. And honestly, Lucy, what I didn't expect was how many people were actually waiting for somebody to start saying these things out loud. Because the response that I've had since I've been posting, and I've been posting for like 2 years now, and so the response that I've had since I've been saying these things has literally told me everything that I need to know in order to see that this is not just like it's not just like an individual problem. Like, this is a widespread thing. Like, I get messages on a daily basis, maybe 100 plus messages a day, along the lines of like, I feel seen, you're in my head, how do you know this? My whole career is what you've literally just described in your last post. This is so accurate. I actually cried, like things like that. And so I know that it's like not, do you know what I mean? It's not like a niche frustration. Like, this is an industry-wide thing, and people genuinely don't realize what's going on under the hood. And so yeah, that's why I do this, and that's why I think that this happens.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you mentioned there about the kind of, like the CMO's kind of taken on a new role in the interview process then, and then, it not quite working out, and, whose fault is that, but I do find that fascinating, because I sort of speak to sort of fellow CMOs quite a lot, where they have had that situation where they've kind of, gone into a role and everything's kind of seemed like this, absolutely perfect opportunity. And then a few months later, 6 months later, after the probation period, it's just like a whole different story.
Yeah,
But
that's
like
common.
this is a two-way street, right? So
Of
during
course.
those interviews, it's very much, we always say this, right? I'm sure you do. It's you, not just kind of like the company, not just selling kind of the role, you selling yourself as well. It's
Yeah,
kind of on both sides, right? There's got to be mutual benefit.
of course.
Why is it that those conversations sound all kind of hunky-dory in the interview process, do you think? And then suddenly, what is it that shifts then when those people
You
then
get in the role.
get into the building? Yeah.
Yeah. This is huge, and it happens so frequently. Like, I've lost count, to be honest with you, the amount of times I've had conversations with people where they've told me they've experienced this in the past, or I've caught up with someone who started something new and they're explaining that the reality is so different to what was described to them during the process. And so there's a number of reasons why I think this actually happens. And so I'll list them all for you. So the first one is, the process is, you said there just a moment ago that it's supposed to be a two-way street, but that is not actually what happens in reality. The reality is that the process is heavily dictated by the client, and it's skewed entirely towards them assessing you essentially and towards their questions. And so there's very little time actually in an interview process for a candidate to be really intentional about who they meet and to really get under the hood of the opportunity, because you only get to meet like who they actually put forward in front of you, and it doesn't really enable you to properly do the due diligence that you should do. So like that's the first point. The second one is the interview process itself. It kind of reminds me of like the dating scene a little bit. So when you're dating and then you're thinking about getting into a relationship with somebody, the interview process is like, it's like that. And nobody shows up on a first date basically looking like crap and unloading all of their baggage onto the table, right? Because that would just be really
Leave the
weird.
pants on the floor, like the toilet seat up. That doesn't happen.
Exactly. And so you would literally run a mile and be telling all your friends, like, they just met this guy. It was ridiculous. So it's the same in the interview process. Like businesses do put on a performance because they're trying to like woo you, basically. So you would meet the hiring manager, for instance. They're selling you a vision, and the founder is obviously going to be as charismatic as they can, and the deck that they'll show you obviously looks amazing, and they tell you all these brilliant things about the culture, and the candidate obviously doing what candidates do. They put their best foot forward because they're trying to secure the role essentially. And so then the offer goes out and you sign that, and then you walk into the environment, and then that's when the reality arrives, and you realize that you were expecting this autonomy that was told to you in the process, but you actually see that there's this massive chain of approval and a committee that they didn't speak about. Or you arrive expecting to have, strategic conversations, and what you've actually got is a to-do list, and it's like my way or the highway kind of thing. Or you expect to have like a seat at the table, and then you arrive and you realize that the table already met and the decision's already been made literally before you even walked in the door. And so that's why it's really important during the dating phase that you have to really dig during that period to like get under the hood. And so that's like the second one, the dating bit. The third one, this is really important as well. But businesses go out with the best intentions and with the ambition to like bring on a marketing leader, but what they don't often assess during that process is business readiness. Are we actually ready to bring on somebody like this? And I think that's really important, because like they genuinely do want a great leader, but not all of them, but a lot of them don't actually know what it actually takes, or what they need to do in order to, create the environment that will enable whoever is in this role to like actually succeed. And so they don't realize how much they actually need to change in terms of their ways of working. And there's a big misunderstanding about what marketing actually does. And there's genuinely still a lot of people out there that think that you just go in and like do a few things and then we just go viral. And so I think there's like this big wake up call when you've got like the expectation and then the reality. So you have to be really aware that a lot of businesses are not necessarily asking themselves, are we ready? And that again comes back to the due diligence that you do in the process.
Yeah.
And then the other piece is that the people around you, for instance. So the leaders that are going to really impact your ability to do well in the role are not necessarily always fully involved in the process, if that makes sense. And so everybody has different ideas as to what that person is there to do. So the CEO, for instance, might talk about in the interview, like the vision and the growth and transformation and all of this amazing stuff. And then unless you've had a process where you've really had the chance to dig in properly with all those specific people, what happens is you start in the role, and then you meet them and you have one-on-one conversations with them, and you realize, oh my God, like the person that's leading sales doesn't believe in marketing. Or you realize that the person who's leading product has a completely different idea of what you're there to actually do. And so all of those things combined, the one-way process, like meeting the representative during the dating phase, the fact that they have the ambition but they're not necessarily ready, and then the misalignment between all the stakeholders, all of that basically means that if you're not careful, you can walk into an environment where the reality is just like so wildly different to what the expectations were, and all of it is basically misalignment. But the good news is, like, you can do certain things to identify that before you walk into that environment, by asking, you know, the right questions to the right people, and not just, you know, is the salary aligned? Does the role sound good? But like, is this business actually ready for
This
somebody like me?
This is really interesting, and I really, really want to unpack this, because I hear this all the time, and I think where we end up going when we have these conversations is kind of almost down to like a very tactical level of, okay, well, here's a bunch of questions that you can ask, and that doesn't always work, because there's so many different kind of like situations. But it does blow my mind that actually you know, these decisions that you're making about joining a company, and you know, you spend more of your life at work, don't you, than, you know, than
Yeah,
actually kind of
right.
at home. But you know, it's a bit like buying a house as well. You know, you go and look at a house, and you look around a house for like 15 minutes, and then suddenly you've made the biggest investment choice of your life.
Yeah,
But you know, these things matter. But yeah,
so true.
what is it then? Let's unpack that. Like, what is it that CMOs should be digging into properly, like before they're actually committing and kind of saying yes, please to that role? What
Yeah.
I'd love to kind of really understand is how can they get to sort of understand what that healthy environment looks like, you know, whether it is speaking to all of those like key stakeholders, like you just said. And then also, what are the kind of red flags, like the common red flags that you see to sort of look out for, where you're like, oh, you know, yeah, this could be a little bit of a dodgy one.
Yeah, 100%. Because all of this stuff is something that I genuinely wish every senior marketer did before they signed off on an offer. Because honestly, the due diligence that candidates do, it's just not deep enough. Like, a lot of people will look at the product online, they'll look at the brand, the growth trajectory as it's been sold to them, the package, obviously, and like, all of that stuff matters, but none of that is actually what tells you what it's actually like to lead marketing inside that business. And so what I tell every senior marketing candidate that I work with is, you need to properly interview the leadership team, literally as hard as they're interviewing you, and not with the questions that kind of get the polished answers, but with the kind of questions that actually reveal the truth. And you also need to really protect the time that you have to do that, because the company will give you 10 minutes at the end of a call, and they'll tell you that that's, you know, that's your due diligence, and it's just not enough. And so what I would recommend is that you ask for specific sessions, and you ask to meet people, more people, and to speak to the key stakeholders that, you know, from your experience, are going to have the ability to really influence your role. Don't just speak to the people that they put in front of you, because companies curate interview panels. They will put, you know, the best people in front of you. They'll put the people in front of you who interview really well, who can sell the vision really clearly. But you need to ask to speak to the people who will actually have an impact on whether you succeed or not. So, you know, the person that's leading sales, because if that relationship is broken, then it's going to be really hard for your things to land, or the CRO, for instance, because if you have a meeting with them one-on-one, then you can really tell how commercial decisions are actually made within the business, or the product director, for instance, because obviously the relationship between marketing and product and the alignment there is like literally everything at a senior level, and the CEO. And just as a side note here, you need to, ideally, if you're not reporting into the CEO for some reason and you're not having a one-on-one with that person, you need to have a meeting with them solo, not just with the CEO, like in the panel with everybody else, so you can really like dig into and understand how they see the relationship with this role working, essentially. And so once you've got into those conversations, you're not just listening to like what they actually say, you're basically doing a number of things, but one of the key ones is that you're assessing that person's ability to change, and their openness to feedback, essentially. So you're trying to understand like how they actually see marketing, for instance, and not just as a theory in function, but how they actually see what marketing does for them personally. So like, do they see marketing as a partner, or do they see marketing as a service provider, for instance, or like, do they talk about marketing with curiosity, or do they talk about marketing with like a very fixed idea of like what it should look like? And it seems that that person might be, difficult to change their opinion. You can ask questions like, what do you think marketing is here to do, for instance? And then you can listen for inconsistencies across different people, because if the CEO says one thing and then the CRO says another thing, and then the product director says something completely different, and you're starting to realize that these people are not really aligned, that's obviously quite telling. And so there's a lot of questions that basically you can ask in order to identify. So other ones would be, and this is really key, financials. You have to ask about the financials, about the business health and stuff like that. Like, tell them that you're sign an NDA, for instance, if needed. And you've got to ask questions that show you how open they are to be challenged, and how they collaborate with people. One of the phrases that I had in my head that I always recommend that people look for is strong opinions, loosely held. And what I mean by that is that's looking for, can the founder take feedback, or is every decision just kind of based on vibes? Because vibes are hard to challenge because they're not really grounded in anything. And so you can go into a role where you're going to spend the entire time in a seat trying to argue against a gut feeling with data. And like, that's going to become very, very exhausting, because you could literally have the best strategy in the world, but if the people that you're working with are not open to be challenged or educated or occasionally proved wrong, then you'll just spend literally every ounce of your time pushing against resistance instead of driving results. And that is obviously a problem that you can spot during the process.
Can I ask, like, would you, so where you are seeing some kind of very strong opinions, would you, in kind of that interview environment or that one-to-one environment, maybe sort of try to challenge them a little on it, just to
Absolutely.
kind of test? Yeah.
100%, because you can see how they respond in the interview setting. It's a reflection of how they will respond in the boardroom or in the meeting rooms in the business. And so you're looking for somebody that leans into being challenged and is open to it, as opposed to somebody that it's quite confrontational, if that makes sense. And so 100%, I would recommend people to do that during the process where you can. And in terms of like because you asked earlier about the red flags that I see within an interview process. So there's a lot, but some of the red flags, for instance, could be, say, for instance, the hiring manager goes through the whole process selling you on the vision, but at no point does anybody ask you, what you need in order to do your best work, or the kind of environment that you need in order to succeed, because that, tells you that they're not really thinking about how to enable you. So that's an important one that I would look out for.
That's interesting.
Another one, when they can't talk specifics at later stages about financials or company health, that really says a lot. And if a company says it's confidential, and then you say, I can sign an NDA, but they're reluctant to share certain information with you, then I think you would really need to start questioning why. Another one, like I mentioned earlier, when opinions are just not grounded in things, and so say, for instance, if you're in the interview setting where you just mentioned, should I challenge, and you challenged the person, and then what the reason for holding that belief is not actually grounded in anything, and it's just based on vibes. You know that the culture that you might go into, it could be an environment where who shouts the loudest wins, and that's not really the kind of environment that you are likely to succeed in. Another one is where nobody can tell you what happened to the last person without getting like really vague or defensive. And I think that one's really key, because you want an environment where people can just be really honest with you. And another one is where the brief just consistently changes during the interview process. And I've seen that. I've seen that happen so many times. And it's just an indication that the business doesn't actually know what they want. And it would be better for them to go away and figure out what they want and then to continue the process. Do you know what I mean? When they figured that out, rather than you realizing once you've got in there that they don't know what they want and everybody's misaligned.
There's a
Go on.
flip side to that one, though. Actually, that's a really interesting one. There is a kind of a flip side to that, in the, like we sort of said right at the start, the sort of the CMO role, I think, is the most one of the most kind of misunderstood roles.
Yeah.
But also I kind of get it, because it is one of the most varied roles. It sounds
Yeah.
really basic, right? Yeah, you're heading up marketing, but for what? For what reason? What's the challenges of the company, and how do you know that particular person has got the experience in solving the challenges that you're particularly facing at the moment? So I think sometimes the scope does kind of change a little bit, but it's basically down to the fact that they don't really understand what you can provide.
Bring.
But I think what you can deliver. I think the key for the marketing, the CMO or the marketing leader, like you said, is to ask a lot of questions about what the state of the company is, what your challenges are. Then you can present, your story, accordingly, so that it matches.
Yeah, exactly. And if you present back to them what you need in order to be able to do that, then you can see how they respond to that as well, so that you know whether it's the kind of people that you can go and do what you need to do, and you're not just going to be up against consistent blockers.
I want to dig into that a little bit more, because that's another thing I think that's sort of really interesting, because a lot of your posts that I read, I love that kind of say, they hint that marketers, it's not always about them failing because that they're bad at their job or they don't have the right skills. It's really because they're failing because their environment around them is a bit messy and they don't really have that support that you mentioned, the enablement.
Yeah.
So how would you say that senior marketers can tell the difference between, this role is going to be kind of like a stretch role, kind of for me, or actually the system's not set up in the right way? Like, where's the balance between those two?
That's such a good question. And it's something that I get asked a lot privately by people, because when you're inside the business, I actually think that it's kind of quite hard to tell, because sometimes a broken system, for instance, is very good at making you feel like it can just be a you problem. And so what I've seen with a lot of marketeers is the first thing that they do is they turn inward. Like, say, for instance, if the goalposts move and you wonder if maybe I just didn't adapt fast enough, or if the budgets are cut, and then you think maybe I didn't just make my case compelling enough or clearly enough. And so I think it's a really good question to ask yourself, how to really determine the difference. And for me, with a stretch role, the thing to understand is a stretch role is hard. But the difference from what I've observed is that it is directionally consistent. And so, like, the brief might be ambiguous and the resources will be tight and the expectations are still very high. But the difference is you go in that environment and the direction, from what I've seen, is not changing every 4 weeks. And like, the people around you are trying to solve the same problem. And when you flag a risk, people are listening. And when you need a decision, you can get one. And when you challenge people, or when people challenge you, everybody assumes good intent. So it's not like arguments and finger pointing and people just talking to each other like crap. Like, it's hard, but it's honest. And I think the difference with the broken system is that it kind of feels like imagine you're like running on a treadmill and you're going at 100 miles an hour, and it just kind of keeps like speeding up, and no matter how fast you go, you don't kind of feel like you're moving forward, like, because the strategy is changing consistently, the budgets get revisited all of the time, like the wins are attributed elsewhere, your concerns are not listened to, not acted on, but you're held accountable for like outcomes that you can't control. And like, the more that you spend time thinking about it, the more that you see that perhaps like these problems were there, before you arrived. And in a stretch role, I think you can feel the pressure, but you still feel like yourself. And whereas in a broken role, I've spoken to so many people in broken systems and they just don't recognize themselves anymore. Like, honestly, they stop bringing the bold ideas that they started at the beginning. They've stopped pushing back. They've started just kind of like getting through the week basically, and they're not stretching, they're basically eroding. And that's the best way that I can explain it, to be honest.
And how, like, this is, I love this because sometimes in kind of interviews, this is almost flipped around the other way. Like, you'll get a question that's along the lines of, like, tell me about a time that you've had to adapt to change. And it's seen, it's kind of put forward like a kind of a really positive skill. And actually it is. Sorry, I'm not saying that it's not. It is a really kind of like positive and very important skill to have, and especially in our world where we do have to be adaptable.
Mm,
But yeah, it's that constant kind of changing of the goalposts, I think, that
mm,
you're alluding to, that's the problem. And I think
yeah,
this is where, like, I think again, like you said it quite a lot in a lot of your posts around kind of communication
yeah,
being kind of one of the biggest sort of differentiators that any marketing, any not
100%,
just marketing leader, but I think any business leader can have, right?
100%.
So what does kind of that communication in that kind of environment like look like to you, would you say? And especially in those very early stages, or even in the interview stage where you have to kind of like respectfully push back or,
Mm.
hold up without sounding sort of really defensive.
I think that the communication of a senior marketer is probably one of the biggest things that you can have in your bow. What's the word that I'm looking for? The biggest, one of the best strings on your bow,
Yeah.
basically. Like, it's so important. And at this level, communication, it's not just about how you present your ideas when you're in the business. It's about how you influence the decisions, basically, under pressure. And your ability to do the job is as important as your ability to communicate, about the job, basically. Like, a lot of CMOs that I speak to say that it's the marketing of marketing, basically, that's the most important. Because you could be like the best marketer in the world, but if you can't hold the line in a room full of people that don't understand marketing, then you do risk losing certain things like budget and headcount and strategy before they've had a chance to land, basically. And it's not necessarily about being the loudest person in the room, but it is about being the clearest person. And it comes down to, from what I've observed, and this is in interview processes and in the role itself as well, is three things. And so the first one that I would say is clarity and conciseness under pressure. The second one is the ability to kind of like translate things into a commercial language.
Mhm.
And then the third one is the ability to kind of be able to like credibly push back. And businesses will assess these things during the interview process, just when you're communicating to them normally with your answers, because they're trying to understand how you will communicate when you're in the boardroom and
Mhm.
when you're in these meetings. And so it's a direct reflection. And when we have clients that are interviewing for these kind of roles, it's one of the most common pieces of feedback that was the differentiator between the person that did get the role and the person didn't, essentially. And so back to the first one that I mentioned, so clarity under pressure. One of the biggest things that I see in interviews and that I hear from clients as well in real world, in role settings, is burying the point, basically. And so sometimes when somebody is really passionate about something, for instance, maybe you're speaking to them in an interview and they're really enthusiastic about the role and they want to talk through their experience, or they've just started in the role and they're in the meeting and they're talking to the different stakeholders about what they've been doing, they'll give context and they'll walk everybody through the journey, and it kind of can be a bit waffly sometimes. And so by the time that you've got to the actual point, sometimes you're losing people in the room or in the interview and the moment has kind of gone. And the people that communicate really effectively, I've seen that they front load the impact. And so what I mean by that is like leading with the answer and then the evidence, and like not the other way around. So if I could give you like a specific example, for instance, like a marketing leader in a boardroom or a meeting might want to talk about talk through, what they've been through, what they've been working on over the last quarter, talking about how they've been looking at the brand and the positioning and reviewing the channel mix and the research from the audience and competitors and looking into the data. And then they'll go on to, and because of all of that, we've found something really interesting, which told us this. But by the time that they've got to that point, basically people have started to mentally leave the building, versus if you are able to really front load impact in your communication skills, people are more on tender hooks listening to what you've got to say. So you could say the same thing that I just said, but start with, we're losing 2 million pipeline, for instance, because we're targeting the wrong audience. Here's how I've identified it. Here's how I fix it. And here's what it's going to cost us. Suddenly, if you start with that, which took 5 seconds, you've got like the full attention of the people in the room, and immediately they all want to listen to what you're about to say next. And so that is exactly the same in interview processes as well. When people go around the houses talking about their role and their career, before starting with, I joined the business and by the time I'd left, I'd improved things by XYZ. Suddenly the interviewer wants to know, how did you do that? Like, tell me more, basically. So that's what I mean about front loading the impact. And it's just really important, because in interviews, in meetings, you don't get a lot of time basically, and people's attention span is really short, and if you haven't quite landed the point quickly, you will lose the room.
It's so funny, isn't it? Because you're so right, and I know in my kind of in the community we say this all the time about marketing just really not being particularly great at marketing ourselves, but it's it's the basic kind of like storytelling, of the who's the kind of the hero, and then all stories have a start, a middle, and an end. And I think you're absolutely right. Like you've got to do that kind of like build up. You don't start with the end. If every book that you opened, kind of you read the last chapter first, you wouldn't bother reading the rest of the book, would you? So yeah, absolutely. That's such a good point. And we've come up to time now, so I'm going to have to wrap it up. But my goodness, I think we might need to do a part 2 of this. It's just been absolutely amazing. I've really enjoyed having the conversation. And there's so many people I think that are going to take so much away from this. So I really appreciate it. Keep doing what you're doing for us, Sinead.
Oh my God, I will.
Yeah, we love you.
I literally will. Honestly, there's so much that can be said, but like, it's just so important, all of the things that we spoke about, to just put the time in, do the due diligence. And for anybody that wants to learn more about these kind of things that I'm speaking about, I literally post about it every single day. Every single day.
Please go and follow Sinead, and I'm sure you won't mind me saying this, but connect with you, and I'm sure if anyone's got any questions, you don't mind people reaching out. So
I do have to caveat that, actually, just with one small point. I've maxed out my LinkedIn connections. You can't accept over 30,000 followers, and so if someone connects and I don't accept, I'm not ignoring them. You can follow, but I can't accept anyone else.
Okay. Wow.
I didn't know there was a limit, and then I was like, what I swear I connected with you last week. And then you just, I think LinkedIn needs to change that.
Yeah, definitely. When you're that popular, Sinead, what a problem to have, right? And that's amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for listening today. See ya.